Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nimhauser. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Hawk Blogger. And happy Monday morning to all of you on this beautiful July day up here in the PNW. I hope everybody's had a good kind of extended holiday weekend, whatever has been working for you. Maybe you're still on vacation. If that's so, I hope you're having a great one wherever you are. And as we enter this Monday, let's take a look at the calendar real quick. Am I right on this? Am I accurate in my thinking? This is the last week. Yes, this is the last week where there will be no Seahawks football for the next however many months till, January, February. What do I mean by that? Well, next Wednesday, July 17th, Seahawks rookies report to training camp. 6 days later, I think on the 23rd, the rest of the team reports for training camp. But we are going to start the slow buildup to what will be a brand new regime in Seattle with the Seahawks, with Mike McDonald, with Ryan Grubb, Scott Huff, the whole crew, Leslie Frazier. And we'll see just what's going to come of the Seahawks this year. If you are a Mariners fan, man, as I am, rough go as a Mariners fan. We are not going to talk about that in detail, but tough time for Mariners fans for sure. But I think Mariners fans are very familiar with tough times. But the focus of the show today is on ownership. I've talked about this in the past, but I'm a fan of the Seahawks, the team. And the thing that actually endures generations, decades, it's not the players, it's not the coaches, it's not the front office, the GMs. It's not even the ownership. It is the fans. We are ultimately what holds the franchise to account. We are the thing that keeps time, keeps history, remembers, has a tribal memory of the franchise. But ownership has massive ripple effects on how the franchise performs, who they hire, how they operate. And this is a time where, once again, there have been these little rumblings of rumors about whether there is going to be a change in ownership for our Seattle Seahawks. And some of the news has been, this is not going to be a clickbaity show. I'm not gonna try to convince you that Jeff Bezos is about to purchase the Seattle Seahawks. But what I do want to talk about, I'll just talk about the most recent news, and I'll put it in context for what I think about it. You're welcome to think what you think and share your thoughts as well. But what I want to do is actually go through the exercise. What would it look like if Jeff Bezos took over the Seahawks? Where might we see some changes? And I'm going to do that by actually sharing some information about this wouldn't be the first company he's purchased. What has he done with other companies that he's purchased? Where is his focus right now? Where is he spending his time and his money? And then also taking a moment to actually, this is for the geeks out there. I am a former tech employee, maybe future tech employee. We'll see how all my career stuff shakes out. But we'll talk about the Amazon leadership principles, and we'll apply those to the Seahawks. How would some of those principles potentially apply to how Jeff Bezos might operate the Seahawks? So I don't think you're going to find another show exactly like this. It is going to be a mix of tech geekiness, business, and sports. And it feels like a good time to do that with the recent news. I will say, as a Seahawks, Mariners, and Blazers fan, and now I'm probably an Indiana Fever fan. I got to say, I watch all the Indiana Fever games. But my kid sent me a text this weekend about an article on Phil Knight, that he's 86 years old and he's so desperate to win a championship that he's going to provide University of Oregon with unlimited NIL money. And my son sent that to me not because he's a graduate from University of Oregon, but because his caption that he sent me was, man, just imagine if Phil Knight was not blocked from purchasing the Blazers. The rumor was that he wanted to buy the Blazers from Jody Allen, and that he was rejected. And this notion of having an owner that's willing to spend any amount of money, go over the luxury tax in the NBA to potentially bring a winner sooner, hard to stomach. But that's an example of the types of things that an owner can do should they choose to in the NBA. The NFL is not like that. There is a hard salary cap, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So first, let's talk about the quote news and why is this even coming up as a question. The story that kind of made the rounds, and it is absolutely silly as far as I'm concerned, but I'll tell you what it is that Jeff Bezos has to file when he is going to sell with the SEC, when he's going to sell Amazon stock. He has enough of it that he needs to share it. And so what happened? Jeff Bezos recently announced that he would be selling about $4.93 billion in Amazon shares. And people kind of connected the dots and they're like, well, that's about how much it would cost to buy the Seahawks. Is he making a move to have the money to buy the Seahawks? Here's the problems with that. There are a number of problems with that. One, Jeff Bezos sold $8.5 billion worth of Amazon stock in February. This isn't new. He's been selling this stock primarily after he moved from Washington to Florida, which by doing so has so far saved him $600 million in capital gains tax, because Washington State has a capital gains tax in addition with the federal capital gains tax that applies to, I won't go into all the details, but applies to these large sales of stock. And so that is believed to be a primary reason why he moved. He says it's otherwise, but once he moved to Florida, he sure started selling a lot of Amazon stock. So he's already sold $13.4 billion worth of Amazon stock in 2024. I don't think any of that has anything to do with Jeff Bezos doing something to buy the Seahawks. I mean, he can be using that money for any number of things. It could be diversification out of Amazon. It could be all sorts of things. And we'll talk about his other endeavors like Blue Origin and things of that nature. But that's the first thing. I do not believe that his sale has anything to do with an impending purchase of the Seahawks. Two, the people are also connecting the fact that there was a specific date, time when Jody Allen could sell the Seahawks without having to pay an additional fee to King County or the city of Seattle. That as well is, I believe, in question. I think that actually might be pushing back to 2025 when that date is. in any event, I don't believe that's the real trigger either. And Jody Allen and Burt Cole just hired a new, like, gave John Schneider the keys to the car to hire a new coaching staff. Um, if they were really just ready to sell right now, it would have made so much more sense that they would give the new owner the opportunity to decide what he wanted to do or she wanted to do with the team. A new owner coming in and inheriting a first-year head coach and new coaching staff is not as typical. A better example would be what happened with the Washington Commanders. Washington Commanders sold for $6 billion last year. And what did he do? He brought in new GM in Adam Peters, brought in new head coach in Dan Quinn, and you have an entirely fresh new beginning in Washington. That's more typical. So that's why I don't think there's a lot of evidence that Jeff Bezos is about to buy the Seahawks. But then you're like, well, why are you doing this show then, Brian? Well, because, guys and gals, I think it'll be fun to talk about, like, what might happen if he were to buy the Seahawks. Okay. And what are some of the things we could potentially guess at? First, I'm kind of curious if you are as well. What are kind of the going values for franchises around? I just talked to you about the Washington Commanders sale, which was $6.05 billion. I believe the Carolina Panthers were the most recent sale before that. That was, if that's right, that was in 2018. There might have been something since then, actually. He bought it in 2018 for $2.75 billion. Let's take a look at NFL franchise purchase price. Yeah, so there's also the current values we'll talk about in a second. Let's see. Last team each. Okay, here we go. So this has got the sale price of every franchise in the last time it was sold. Let's keep looking. 1960, 1959, 1932, 1966, 64. Wow, some of these have been held for a very long time. 1985, 84, 89, 94, 95. Seahawks were last sold, by the way, in 1997 to one Paul Allen for $194 million. What a profit center the NFL is. 2000, 2005, 99, 2010, 11, 12, 14, 23. Yeah. So the Commanders were the last. It looks like the Broncos with the Walmart guy before that. So in 2022, bought the Broncos for $4.65 million. A year later, they bought the Commanders were bought for $6.05 billion. And then, yes, Tepper was the most recent beyond that in 2018 for $2.28 billion. If we look at franchise values, let's take a look and see what the Seahawks value was. So, let's see if I can pull this up. 1 second, folks. So we'll see what likely the Seahawks value would be. I would guess it would be around $5 billion, but let's just see. The average NFL franchise value is $5 billion. Seahawks franchise value is believed to be $4.5 billion, according to Forbes. So that's the most recent we have. If you're curious where that ranks, they've got the Seahawks at 14th on the Forbes list, 14th out of 32 teams in terms of value, right around what the Broncos were. And the Broncos sold a few years ago for, what would we say, 2 point whatever billion. So in any event, this is a very, very much in the wheelhouse of Jeff Bezos. If he wanted to, with his 220 something billion dollars, he can afford, out of change in his couch, to buy the Seahawks. I do see there's some super chats I want to get to, and so let me pull those up. Garth Knight, good to see you, Garth. Says, I love your thumbnail with Bezos in a Kitna jersey. That's actually a Kitna jersey or a Geno Smith jersey. So interesting that your mind went there. He says, sign me up for Jeff as the owner. Also have a super chat from Michael Fawcett. Thank you, Michael. He says, here's some money for you to buy the Seahawks or to charity. Thank you for your continued Seahawks coverage every day. You're welcome. I appreciate you as a YouTube member as well. Good morning to all the YouTube members out there and Patreon members out there. Really appreciate it. Yeah, so I will say, as I kind of get into this, that I was surprised when I announced this was the topic of the show today, how many people had strong reactions. I mean, there are people that are just desperate for Bezos to buy the Seahawks, and there's people that are desperate for him to never buy the Seahawks. I don't have that kind of strong reaction one way or another. It is purely a hypothetical exercise for me. But I've been really surprised to see the amount of strong reactions. And I think part of that might be that people previously had some real concern about Jody Allen. And I think that she got some additional credibility and buy-in from fans when she made the move from Pete Carroll to this new regime. It changed the perception of her from maybe a caretaker owner to a active owner that is actually looking to steer this franchise to glory. And I think people appreciate that and don't want to feel like their franchise is just kind of in purgatory. But I don't know. There's probably a bunch of reasons for that. So what can we learn from Jeff Bezos and what he's done elsewhere? Because like I said, if he were to buy the Seahawks, this wouldn't be the first time that he bought a company. He bought the Washington Post back in 2013. And that was a passion project for him. That was something that he wanted to make sure to, keep journalism independent as much as possible, and all the other items that he mentioned in terms of why he wanted the Post to survive as an enterprise. He bought them for $250 million, as I said, back in 2013. And what's interesting there is there's a few things that happened when he bought the Post. One, initially he got quite involved. And anyone that knows Amazon knows that he's a very involved leader. And he, one, was, I think, good at listening to some of the people that were already in place, but two, had some, he infused some money, but he wanted to be very careful about hiring. And he had specific rules about, okay, we don't need as many what he called indirect employees, like editors. He wanted more direct employees, like people that were doing the reporting. And interestingly, the people at the Post then adjusted to this, and they started actually changing their job requests to not have the word editor in them. They had words like business analyst and strategist. So they were kind of trying to work the system to get their job postings still available. But Bezos came in with the mind of making the Post a profitable business. And as of now, it's still losing money. It's expected to lose $100 million in 2023. And it's actually been leaking subscribers. So it's not been this huge success. It has still been what I would consider a passion project for Bezos. And what started to happen with his purchase there is he was initially very involved. He sat in on the meetings for what kinds of articles, what kind of stories they were running. He really encouraged them to push towards digital, which is not a surprise. He wanted it to be a global brand and not just a brand in the States or even regionally in terms of Washington. And he hired a new chief executive. He hired a guy named Fred Ryan, who had been working at Politico, and had him serve as the publisher to replace the person, Catherine Weymouth, I think was her name, that had been doing it previously. And so Bezos put Ryan in place. That's one clue. What did he do when he first came in? He put in place someone that he believed could run the company, knowing that he wasn't going to be as involved as he would be as like the CEO of Amazon. What would that mean if he were to do that here? I think there's some implications there that could mean he would want to replace the people at the top. But you have to understand that the Seahawks and the franchise is not just the football side. There is the other side, the business side of the franchise, where they're running ticket sales, they're running the stadium experience, all those kinds of things. And there's PR and there's all sorts of other aspects. So I think that you could see initially, if this is any indication, that Bezos' first act in there might be to get in there and actually look at the business, look at what's doing well, look at the performance. And we'll get to this in a little bit when talking about Amazon's leadership principles, but look at the amount of innovation and progress that's being made and whether it matches his expectation or whether he would want to bring somebody in who would run the business side of the Seahawks the way he wanted to. And where does that have implication for? Well, that would mean Chuck Arnold would be somebody you would potentially, I don't know if he would have to be nervous, but he would certainly be somebody that Jeff Bezos would spend time with and want to hear his vision for the business side of the Seahawks. And if he passed Jeff Bezos' assessment, then I think he'd stick around. But if he didn't, that's the type of change you could see potentially early in a Bezos ownership. Who is Chuck Arnold? If you don't know, he's risen up the ranks. I've met Chuck, know Chuck a little bit. Very nice guy. He is the president of the Seahawks and of First and Goal Incorporated. And so he manages Lumen Field, the event center, WAMU Theater. He's been with the Seahawks for 31 years. He's been the team president for 6 years and had been the COO for a number of years before then. So he is a name that for me would be one of the people who would be on notice if Jeff Bezos were to purchase the Seahawks. And for folks just joining, this is a hypothetical. We're going through this. I already kind of dismissed out of hand this notion that anything that's happened recently indicates that Jeff Bezos is about to buy the Seahawks. Doesn't mean he won't, but I don't believe the recent stock sale has anything to do with that. There's a lot of other clues of why that has nothing to do with the Seahawks. But let's keep going. What else did Jeff Bezos do with the Post? An interesting quote here. This is an article in the New York Times kind of going through from last year about his experience. It says, after initial surge of interest that lasted several years, and following his decision to step down as Amazon's chief executive, Mr. Bezos receded somewhat at the Post, according to two people familiar with his interactions with the newsroom. That changed in January after Ms. Busby spoke with Mr. Bezos and conveyed an urgent message that morale was low at the Post. Much of it, she said, stemmed from missteps by the newspaper's chief business executive, Mr. Ryan, according to two people familiar with the remarks. So a couple things that are interesting there is surge of interest at the beginning. So I think you'd expect to see that with the Seahawks, and we'll talk about like what when that might that look like. Waned after several years. I think you probably can expect that as well, depending. And then the other part is the person that he hired, this Ryan guy. Let me make sure I have this correct. Yes. So where'd that guy go? Okay, yes, Fred Ryan from Politico. So the Ryan guy that he hired to run the business wasn't doing that well, according to people that were there. And that morale was super low, had like gone low, and that there was a number of mistakes that this guy had made. And this had involved people leaving the company. What then happened is come January of last year, Bezos actually came into the newsroom and he sat in on the morning news meeting. He met with some of the Post journalists, and a number of employees expressed their concerns to him about the guy that he had hired, Ryan. And then what happened 6 months later, in June, Ryan resigned. So interesting just that Bezos seems to have swung and missed on his first major hire of the company, of the Post, entering a new business that he didn't have familiarity with. And actually the business has not gotten better. It's actually kind of receded since the last election. But where Bezos did spend time on things like experimental projects. I'll read this from the Times article. Mr. Bezos has personally weighed in on an experimental project being developed for the Post opinion section, which is being run by the editorial page editor David Shipley, former Bloomberg editor he helped recruit. The initiative, which doesn't yet have an official name, is exploring a forum for readers in cities across the United States to submit their own opinions and commentary. Mr. Bezos told confidants that this new endeavor is an opportunity to reach readers who may have tuned out the news. We're not going to spend all this time on the Post, but the reason I'm bringing this up is it's an example of the kinds of projects that are going to catch his attention. He's an innovator, he's a leader, he's still young enough and a technologist that he's going to want to get involved with doing some odd things, some experimental things. And I would bet a lot of those would be on the business side. One of the things that I bring up here, what is one of the big changes that's gone on for Amazon in the past few years? Well, if you're an Amazon Prime purchaser or subscriber, and an NFL fan, that Amazon started carrying NFL games. And Amazon's gotten into sports in general, and they're trying to innovate the experience of sports. I think you could also make a guess. One of the other things that's changed significantly in the landscape has been sports betting. The NFL has embraced it more. Um, you're seeing different experiences there. And you certainly, Amazon Prime has been playing and thinking about ways to potentially integrate retail into a viewing experience. They've looked at betting and getting involved there and what makes sense in game at prop bets and things like that. It wouldn't surprise me at all if one of the things that Bezos would do, should he purchase the Seahawks, would be to get into something related to innovating on this fan experience, maybe out of the stadium. I think he is someone that, while a lot of folks will point at the fact that owners are trying to keep people in the stadium, Bezos' history is generally around digital, and it's generally around scalability. And there's a limit. There's literally a physical limit of how many people can be in the stadium. And there's also a limit to how much money you can soak out of those people, including me, that still go to the games instead of watch them on TV. So I think it would likely be that he would try to find digital experiences that could be had by any fan of the Seahawk anywhere watching the game that would enable a new revenue stream. Now, there's very likely some rules and restrictions about what any individual franchise can do relative to the whole NFL. But I believe that is where he would try to innovate. He would come in and look for ways, because honestly, right now, there's no real way to be a Seahawks fan on game day and have a different experience than any other fan that's watching that game on TV. And I would guess that he would look for ways to change that. And if you're looking at how the NFL is growing worldwide, in Europe, in Mexico, South America, all these different places, that would be the business opportunity I think he would jump on. I also do think he would look at the in-stadium experience. It wouldn't surprise me if he would throw significant money into Lumen Field and update parts of it that don't make business sense necessarily, but just because when he's at the games, would want to have a certain special experience. It might involve scoreboards, replay screens. It might involve, new renovations. It wouldn't surprise me if he sunk some money into the stadium if he were to purchase the team. But I think it's also important, and we'll get into the Amazon leadership principles in a second, that also will give us some thoughts and creative thoughts. And I'd love to hear from all of you as well about this. But keep in mind that his passion project above all passion projects since he has left Amazon has been Blue Origin. Blue Origin is not an ED pill, if you don't know what it is. Blue Origin is his space program. And it was part of why he cited that he moved down to Florida to be closer to that program. It is a program that has been bleeding tons of money. And if you actually, they don't have as much information about the finances of Blue Origin. But if you look at something like SpaceX, which has generally been kicking their ass, SpaceX is currently profitable, which is kind of crazy, but they were losing billions of dollars a year on SpaceX. And you can assume that Bezos, whose Blue Origin project has been doing worse than SpaceX, Elon Musk's SpaceX, is losing billions as well. Now, he has not had as ambitious of plans. They've been quiet for a few years. They're just starting to reinvigorate that program. But the number one place that his money and attention has been going and probably would continue to go would be Blue Origin, excuse me. So I don't know that, also the fact that he'd be living in Florida and he spends most of his time on his yacht, his super yacht, his $500 million super yacht that I think I read somewhere costs like $100 million a year to operate. But how much does that mean he's going to be actually even in Seattle for these games or go to different cities? Paul Allen went to a lot of these games and he went to a lot of Blazers games. I don't know, like how much is maybe for a year he'd go to a lot of these things, but it doesn't really match his travel schedule very well. So I kind of wonder about. There were some rumors, by the way, that he wanted to buy the Commanders and that he had a bit of a rivalry with Dan Snyder, which honestly makes Jeff Bezos seem better to me because Snyder's the biggest jerk around, but that he was blocked from buying the Commanders. That would have made more sense geographically if he was going to be in Florida. I'm not even certain that he would want to buy a Seattle-based franchise. Given where he's now located. But we're still going to explore this notion nonetheless. I'm going to look back at some chats. I'm curious to see the reactions to this from different people because it's been all over the place. Here's a comment from Corey Coleman, which relates to one of the things I brought up. He says, the only issue I could see is that Amazon owns Thursday Night now, and it could be a conflict of interest. Yeah, that's kind of part of my point. He does not run Amazon anymore, but he owns a significant portion of their shares and would benefit financially from what the NFL is doing with that. I don't know if he would have to divest a certain amount of his Amazon ownership before he could get involved. I think those are all fair questions. On the other hand, the NFL could very much see it as this is someone who could do amazing things for the NFL in negotiating with Amazon to get the most out of that partnership and actually grow it even further and grow the NFL, the overall NFL pie further. Here's a comment from Kyle from South Park. As someone who worked at Amazon for a year, you don't want Bezos buying the Seahawks. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of that sentiment. I will tell you, I was recruited to work at Amazon multiple times, and many, many years ago when AWS was just getting started. That's Amazon Web Services for people that don't know, and that's a online product that basically allows a lot of the software online and mobile that you see to run. It's built on top of that. At the time, it was very nascent. And I had a conversation with the hiring manager about, like, they were trying to convince me. If you don't know this about Amazon, they had flat compensation, like salary for employees. So everybody made a certain amount and didn't matter if you were executive or not. And they really tried to make stock where you were getting your compensation, and the benefits in general were not impressive. We're not great at Amazon. And then the culture at Amazon, not great either I mean, there's pockets where it was better or worse, but the general reputation was, this is a place where you are worked to the bone, whether you are a white collar employee or a blue collar employee, and that they really milked you for all they could. One of the things that also I think might be at least of some value to talk about here is part of the reason I didn't take that job was I only work on things that I'm actually interested in the product. And as much as I saw the business opportunity, I wasn't that interested in AWS. It's kind of boring from my perspective. No offense to AWS folks, but just not what floats my boat. But the interesting thing was, I asked whenever I'm exploring a new opportunity, I ask questions about the business because an indicator of a good product manager, which is what I was for me, and I hire based on this a lot of times, is how you've evaluated the places you work and the businesses you choose to work on. And AWS, it was a commodity. It was something that like web hosting, web compute, all these different things was clearly, if it wasn't already, it was going to be a commodity. And how are you going to make money on a commodity? And the interesting conversation that I learned a lot in was Amazon's philosophy was that's where we thrive. We want to take things that are incredibly low margin, meaning that the profit on them is very small, but that have massive scale and that we win. They did it with books. They've done it with, they try to do it with groceries. They've done it with web services, but in every situation, Amazon's looking for massive scale and they don't necessarily care about massive profitability. They care about some profitability, but massive scale. And I don't know if that would have much influence on a purchase of the Seahawks. Generally, a lot of these franchises aren't making a lot of money year to year. It's in the sale of the franchise where you make the money. So I don't know how that would translate for Bezos in terms of NFL ownership. But getting back to Kyle's comment, the environment, it's tough. I mean, I know a lot of people that are happy there, but it's tough. Hawks fan Matt Man says, at least he has ties to the area, unlike someone like Clay Bennett. I saw this from somebody else that was like, oh man, he's gonna buy them and move them. I don't see that. But I understand the trepidation. I mean, I lived through the Seahawks move scare back in the 90s. I understand. I obviously lived through the Sonics move. I don't think that would be what would happen here. Ricardo says Amazon is super frugal and that worries me. Well, it's part of why I was bringing up the post. I mean, and Blue Origin. Bezos has been dumping hundreds of millions and in some cases billions of dollars into money losing enterprises. And so I don't know that his frugality has really showed up as much in his private ventures and his personal ventures as it did in his Amazon life. We got no to Bezos from Digitech. We've got, let's see, this is from Digitech as well. If people are happy with how Tepper is running the Panthers, then they will love Bezos and owning the Seahawks. I don't know about that. So Dave Tepper has been an absolute train wreck for the Panthers. Their current situation might be better, but someone being super involved as an owner doesn't mean that someone else being super involved is going to be bad or good, because the fact of the matter is, I think Dave Tepper is not the business person that Jeff Bezos is. He's not the innovator or the leader or any things that Bezos has accomplished. Paul Allen is he's a billionaire owner. I think he's a different type of owner than Steve Ballmer, like different people are different people. So I wouldn't take that as a really good indicator. Got a comment from Jeffrey 4 here, a YouTube member. Thank you, Jeffrey. Says teams generally clean up the future cap when they're preparing to sell too. That can be true. I think I don't know if that's really going to be. I think that where you'd have some question is like long-term contracts, and that's why the Mike McDonald thing that was rumored to be I think a 7-year deal or 6-year deal. That is not the type of move you make when you're about to sell generally. Let's see. Nugash says Bezos is a smart dude and he'd probably be a good owner. Let's see. Anything else here? Yeah. So I think from Sean Thompson, thank you, Brian, for doing this literally every day. You're welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Garth says, consider me firm in the Bezos to buy Hawks camp. Another comment from Ricardo. The other concern is that the guy is stretched way too thin to pay attention to the Seahawks. He might be an absentee owner. This is the opposite of the Tepper comment. And I don't know that absentee owners are the worst thing. As long as they are footing the bill, as long as they are holding people accountable and they have a structure to do that, I don't think an absentee owner is the worst thing. And I think an active owner can be great. It can also be problematic. Generally, I don't think owners should be making a lot of the sports decisions, like the football decisions in this case. Like Jerry Jones, I don't think should be, I wouldn't be, there's a lot of reasons I'm happy he's not our owner, but I think that's where they get into trouble. That's where Dave Tepper got into trouble. I think him forcing Bryce Young ultimately not great. But I don't think an absentee owner actually necessarily is a bad thing. In fact, it may pose less problems than an active owner. Let's see. Noah Berman, he says day one of manifesting Jeff Bezos owning the Seahawks. So again, you can see here how many different feelings there are on Bezos. Let's see if there's anything else here. Yeah. All right. So well, here's a comment from Matthew Phillips. I can't believe anyone is on board with this. Yeah. So next thing I wanted to kind of do, if you're not familiar with Amazon and their leadership principles, you'll either find this interesting or utterly incredibly boring. It might be both. I don't know. But they're pretty well known in the tech industry. They're also well known, I think, in general business leadership circles. And they publish these principles and they've grown over the years. But I thought it might be interesting to kind of apply some of these principles to the Seahawks and what we think collectively they might mean in a Seahawks context. The first leadership principle is customer obsession. And it says leaders start with customer and work backwards. They work vigorously to earn and keep customer trust. Although leaders pay attention to competitors, they obsess over customers. So my thought here on customers obsession would be us, fans. And this is where I get to some of the notions I brought up earlier. What are some of the fan experiences that Jeff Bezos would want to examine, pick apart, and look to improve? I've talked about this with some of the folks in Seahawks land. I think that if you don't know him, Jeff Dunn is an amazing guy. He works for the Seahawks, and he's currently customer obsessed. He is the chief strategy officer for the Seahawks right now, and he works on stadium experience and all those things. And I've had conversations with him about, I think you've done, like, for people that have Clear, there's now a way to get quick access into the stadium through Clear or quicker. Obviously, if you're a suite purchaser or a club level, there's separate entrances just for those folks. I believe people that are attending the game would pay an additional fee. I think they'd pay some sort of membership fee that if you had, imagine airline loyalty, where you're able to get through security faster, you're able to get on the plane faster. I do believe that there's value in finding ways, and people would pay for it, to get more quickly into the stadium. This allows you to get there later. I think there's other things. I think that there might be opportunity in parking. Parking is so expensive. If there were the Seahawks thought about this, I doubt they'd do it. But again, just spitballing here. If they were to approach different parking companies, companies that own lots in Seattle, and offer them a cut of some kind of membership that if you were this member, that on game days, parking was a certain price, a certain set price, or you got a certain discount. I think that would enhance things for fans that are attending games. There could be things you could, I mean, I would do things potentially food wise with a membership that if you are, the Seahawks have been so focused on trying to get people to buy food and beer and drinks at the stadium. And by the way, it's still just like, I don't think it's that good. It's okay, but it's not great. It's definitely not like the Mariners experience. But I would look, and he might look to go beyond the walls of the stadium. If you did some kind of Seahawks membership for people that are attending games, and there was discounts on food at participating bars or restaurants in the city, you could have people eat outside the stadium, but the Seahawks still make money on that because they are growing this membership. So I think there's something like that could be something that would come out of a customer obsessed perspective. I think there's ways to improve. I've talked about this with Jeff. I really think the replay screens is not a great experience overall. It's definitely improved. And there are some limits to what you can do with the way that stadium was built, in terms of you're not going to have the massive screens that you do at the Rams stadium or the Cowboys stadium. But I still think there's potential where that would be something that customer obsession would get focus on if Jeff Bezos was there. A comment here from Tyler Lawrence, an idea. Season ticket holders get free Prime. I don't know where the conflict of interest would be on that, but I can absolutely see something there. I wouldn't be surprised if Amazon employees got some sort of special benefit. We've seen that. If you ever gone to the SeaTac where Amazon and Microsoft employees have their own Alaska Airlines line, who knows what they would do. Arcane Electric says he can build us a new stadium. I don't know that he would build a new stadium. I mean, sure, he could, but I don't know. I don't know if that's what he would do. Next leadership principle, ownership. Leaders are owners. They think long-term and they don't sacrifice long-term value for short-term results. So I don't know. I mean, ownership is a little bit on the nose here for him owning the team. I think he would look for this in his leaders, and he'd look for people that had vision. And that's why I said I think he talked to Chuck Arnold and want to know what his vision, his long-term vision was. This next one's an interesting one. Invent and simplify. Again, third leadership principle for Amazon. Leaders expect and require innovation and invention from their teams and always find ways to simplify. They are extremely aware, look for new ideas from everywhere, and are not limited by not invented here mindset, which is the notion. If you don't know NIH, there are people that if they didn't come up with the idea, they're not interested, and that's a common barrier. So NIH is not a good thing, not invented here. As we do new things, we accept that we may be misunderstood for long periods of time. This is, I think, a really core value for Bezos and for Amazon in general. This just notion of, as much as I don't respect a lot of things about the way Amazon has operated, I have a ton of respect for the way that they've innovated. It is very hard to be on top, to be an incredibly profitable, high growth company, billions and billions of dollars, and come up with new lines of business that also are growing at or greater speeds, incubate new things on a regular basis. The fact that they've gotten into sports, the fact that they got into groceries and then contactless purchasing and all sorts of, I mean, AWS could not be more different of a business than books, online books were. Like they just have really jumped into a bunch of different industries, and that's because in part they've had this notion of invent and simplify, and they've valued people that have that. I do wonder how Bezos would look at the Seahawks and decide how inventive and innovative they've been. I'm not sure they'd score super high on those marks, at least on the business side of things. Where I do think he would really be bought in is Mike McDonald. I mean, he is considered one of the best innovators and strategic thinkers from a coaching perspective in the league. And everyone's adopting not only his defense, but they're trying to adopt his method for teaching that defense. So I think Mike McDonald would pass this test with flying colors. I think that John Schneider would do pretty well on this test as well, given the fact that John has started embracing analytics more. John has started sports science. Those are two things that he called out as specifically different from what he'd be looking for in a coach this time around that he might not have been looking for when he was first hired for the Seahawks. And I think analytics would be a massive part of what Jeff Bezos would bring to the Seahawks. He would want to understand the math behind every decision, fourth down decisions. He would want to understand the math behind how they're approaching certain matchups. There are a number of companies out there right now that are trying to do as much data mining, data science work around NFL play-by-play data as possible. Bezos, I think, would be all over that, looking for edges. That's where I think, personally, I'd be excited about. I think he'd bring a perspective that very few, if any, other teams would have. He understands analytics and data science at a level that very few, if any, others would have. And so I think that would be a really fascinating. He might bring new leadership into the analytics part of the team. I wouldn't be surprised if he dramatically increased the budget for analytics if he were to purchase the team. And I would bet that he would want weekly reports of the matchup, why they're prioritizing certain things, and then maybe a look back at the previous week, why things happened, what worked, what didn't, why, trends going on in the NFL, trends going on in college. I think he would be all over the data. And personally, I think that would be welcome. I would like that. And I think that's maybe his biggest superpower that he would bring. I'll go through a couple others. I'm not going to go through everyone, but another principle is that leaders are right a lot. My wife and my oldest son would laugh at this. They give me crap for being right a lot and that it's annoying. I find it annoying when you're right and people don't listen to you, but that's a whole nother topic. Leaders are right a lot. They have strong judgment and good instincts. They seek diverse perspectives and work to disconfirm their beliefs. So I think he would bring in and want to hear not just echo chamber. I think during the draft, he would want to understand oppositional perspectives. I think he'd want to see other game theory kind of approaches to, if we picked this person instead of that person, if we traded up or traded back. I think he would get involved and would want to really push against consensus in like draft preparation, because that would help him get to confidence that what the team was doing was the right thing. So I think he would get involved with the draft in that regard. Learn and be curious. Leaders are never done learning and always seek to improve themselves. They're curious about new possibilities and act to explore them. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's much to say here. I will say John Schneider, I think, has shined in this regard. I think he's talked about things he's learned from every draft. I think he's talked about books that he's read, podcasts he's listened to. I think he's grown a lot, and I think that this would serve him well. Hire and develop the best. Leaders raise the performance bar with every hire. If you don't know this bar raiser concept from Amazon, it's that for them hiring, especially leaders, there's got to be clarity that the person they're hiring actually improves the company, does something better than anyone else. And this is a really big part of Amazon's hiring philosophy. There's a bunch there that I won't go into, but this is not something Pete Carroll would have passed, to be totally frank. I mean, this was my biggest issue with Pete, maybe, is that he did not bring people aboard that raised the bar, especially on defense. And he had a lot of shots at it. So I think Mike Macdonald has done that. And you've actually even heard, if you've listened carefully, they've used the phrase raise the bar. I believe this is a concept and a principle that's already in the room for this new regime. Insist on the highest standards. Leaders have relentlessly high standards. Many people think these standards are unreasonably high. Leaders are continually raising the bar and drive their teams to deliver high quality products, services, and processes. Leaders ensure that defects do not get sent down the line and problems are fixed so that they stay fixed. There's this anecdote for Amazon about Amazon execs, the C-level folks would go to answer customer service calls, and that there was a customer service issue that they heard, like Jeff Bezos was on the call and he wanted to fix it. Saw that there was an issue, and the support agent said, yeah, this has been the case for a long time. It's a real problem. And Bezos, they quote, pushed the red button. They stopped everything until it got fixed. This is kind of harkens back to a Toyota philosophy about how they worked on their production lines, and that if there was a defect found in a Toyota production line, they would hit the red button to pause the line, and they wouldn't start it again until not only was the defect fixed, but that it was permanently fixed, so it wouldn't come back. And then you restart. And so you basically fix the problem as soon as it's found, and you don't continue until it's fixed. Well, I think that would be really interesting applied to day-to-day ownership of football, because I mean, I don't know that you can really not fix, or I don't know if there's a way to permanently fix a lot of defects with your game plan, with the way a player's playing. I do wonder if this would leak into personnel evaluation, not of people in the company, the Seahawks company, which I think that for sure, but the players. If there's a player that has a flaw that continually hurts the team, and there's no evidence of it being fixed, they're resistant to it being fixed, I do wonder if that would be something that would affect that Jeff Bezos would say, well, that's something we don't want, and we need to move on from that person. That might be a stretch, but the other piece that I think it could influence is definitely these types of decisions. I think, again, getting back to the analytics stuff, if there's a game plan or a specific series of play or package of plays that is not working, I think that Bezos potentially could influence reusing and the recidivism of that kind of problem, by saying he'd want to think about ways to eliminate it. The last few things, I mean, there's so many of these. I'm not going to read them all, but think big. That's kind of speaks for itself, but I think you might see some really big ideas if he was there. Bias for action. I don't think that as much applies here. Frugality. Accomplish more with less. Constraints breed resourcefulness, self-sufficiency, and invention. There are no extra points for growing your headcount, budget size, or fixed expense. So this is getting back to what someone brought up earlier. Amazon's known for their frugality. I'm not sure that Bezos has demonstrated that in his other purchases, but worth knowing, it is one of the principles. Earn trust. Leaders listen attentively. They speak candidly and treat others respectfully. They are vocally self-critical, even when doing so is awkward or embarrassing. And they benchmark themselves and their teams against the best. I love this, to be honest, applied to the Seahawks. I love the idea that Bezos would come in and say, who is the best team in the NFL? What's the best franchise in the NFL? What are they doing? How are they performing in all of these key ways? And how are we performing? How are we performing relative to draft talent? How are we performing relative to free agent contracts? How are we performing relative to each position on the field? How are we performing in terms of decisions that we've made? I think Jeff Bezos would be able to tell you the amount of win probability each coach in the NFL is either adding or subtracting to their team. And I think he would apply that to the Seahawks. That's what I would want. I would want an owner that isn't just so insular in their thinking that they think, hey, what we're doing is great. No one can do it better. If we're not winning the Super Bowl, someone's doing it better. So who are these teams that are doing that? How are they doing that? And constantly evaluating your benchmark. But that doesn't mean you just copy them, but you understand that this is what the best looks like. And then you figure out how far you are from that and how to get there. So I think that's a particularly interesting one. Dive deep. Leaders operate at all levels. Stay connected to the details. No task is beneath them. Personally, I love that one. Have backbone, disagree and commit. Disagree and commit is a very big Amazon one. You hear this all over the place. It's a little obnoxious at this point, but draft would be a great application of disagree and commit. If after really evaluating all the different choices and all the different approaches you could take, once there could be disagreement in the room, but once you get to the point where, okay, it's time to make the call, everybody has got to be committed to that. There's no more disagreement. Everybody's behind it. Let's say that there was two people that didn't think the Seahawks should take Byron Murphy, that they should take somebody else. Once that choice is made, those people cannot continue to say, see, we should have drafted somebody else. They have to be committed to finding ways for Byron Murphy to succeed. A lot of people misuse disagree and commit. They think it's about stopping their argument, just shutting up. That's not what it's about. It's about that once the decision's made, you actually change from a detractor or someone who's in disagreement from that choice to someone who is supporting that choice and will do everything possible to make it succeed. I see this all over tech, all over leadership, where people still just backbite and second guess in the hallways, and that is not disagree and commit. So I think where this would show up would be like the big decisions, the trades, the free agent choices, all those like coaching hires. That is where disagree and commit would show up. I wouldn't be surprised if this already is in application there. And then the last one that I'd say is deliver results. Leaders focus on the key inputs for their business and deliver them with the right quality and timely fashion. Despite setbacks, they rise to the occasion and never settle. Yeah, so I don't think Bezos would not be an owner who would really be open to all the different reasons why they didn't succeed and why they didn't win and why they aren't improving. He would, and why the business as well was not going the way he wanted it to go. He would expect results. Now, if you go back to the Washington Post thing and you go to Blue Origin, he hasn't really been getting results, but he did like, well, the guy resigned, but it seems like he was forced to leave. The guy that he hired was asked to leave. Would we have more turnover on the Seahawks if Jeff Bezos was the owner, if the results weren't coming? I think we would. I do think we would. I don't think he would be like a Pittsburgh Steelers owner who sticks with one coach for 20 years, who really values stability in the same way. That's not his mindset. He does not value stability. He values outcomes, and he values the process to get to those outcomes. So I think you'd see potentially more turbulence, But I think you'd see a lot of scrutiny and a lot of what's the word? I think you'd see a rigor to the way that he would evaluate performance all across the board on the business side and on the football side. So, I mean, I'm curious if there's anything else that jumps out to you all as what would likely change if Jeff Bezos was the owner. I'll scroll back through and see if anybody had something while I was talking there. But for me in general, I don't think Jeff Bezos buying the Seahawks would be a bad thing. In fact, as much as I actually really appreciate the way Jody Allen and Burt Cold have been running the Seahawks and would be fine with them continuing, the fact that there's this clarity that at some point they are going to sell is less comfortable to me than the notion of someone like Jeff Bezos buying and basically knowing that there was stability in terms of ownership for the team. And I also would like to have someone who has that many resources at his disposal to put into the team should he see fit. I don't want a Mariners ownership that is a small town, limited, and talk about frugality. I mean, that's a team that squeezes fans for their money and is more interested in the business than they're interested in winning games. So I think Bezos is someone who checks a lot of boxes for me, tons of money, has some connection to Seattle, would bring a analytical, data-driven approach that would be probably best of in breed in the NFL, where analytics are becoming increasingly important. I think he'd push for innovations in fan experience, both in the stadium and out of the stadium. And I think he could do a lot worse than that. I also think he wouldn't be so involved because he is, just married again and traveling the world, and he's got Blue Origin and he's got the Post. He's got other things going on. So I don't think he would be solely focused on the Seahawks. But I think he'd be focused enough to actually bring some good things. So count me in the camp of I'd be for it, but everybody comes with issues. I mean, if you're a billionaire, you got issues. I mean, I'm sorry. Like what it takes to become a billionaire, the choices you make, the sacrifices you make, the type of personality that you have, the lack of touch with reality. I mean, there's all sorts of things that are problematic. I don't really believe anybody needs $1 billion. I don't know how wild that is of a notion, but I mean, billion dollars is a lot. $225 billion is insane. So yeah, I know that people feel strongly about this, but we got a prediction here from Arun, who says Bezos will buy the Seahawks on Tuesday, September 7th, 2024. All right. We'll see. We will see. Someone's joining late here. Yoin Tyrell says, morning, Brian. Is this just a rumor or a real possibility? This is both. It is a rumor. I don't think anything's impending. I said at the beginning of the show that the new news about Jeff Bezos selling $5 billion in Amazon stock is not an indicator that he's about to buy the Seahawks. He's sold $13.4 billion worth of Amazon stock this year so far. He's going to continue selling Amazon stock this year. That has nothing to do with, so there's no indicator that there's something imminent going on. But I do believe he is the odds-on favorite to be the next owner of the Seahawks, and I don't think we know when that would be. I think there's some indication Jody Allen might be the owner for longer than people think. It might be 3, 4, 5 years of her still owning the team. I don't think that's out of the realm. I think a lot of people are thinking about this specific date by when she would sell the team. I'm not convinced that's the case. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm happy to have Jody as the owner, Jody and Bert running the thing. I would also be happy for Jeff Bezos to step in. So, yeah, hopefully that was a little bit of a different take on this Bezos stuff. I think a lot of people probably thought I was doing this show just to have a clickbaity, conversation about, okay, here's all the evidence that he's about to buy them. I think that's crap, and I'm never gonna make stuff up that way. But I did think it was worth taking some time to actually imagine what it would be like if Jeff Bezos bought the team. And I'd love to hear more from you in the comments and chat, other places. I will be back tomorrow with another episode. Until then, I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger. This has been another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care, everybody.